Okay. Um
What?
Sorry, I just thought of something. I want to play for you. I'm
Oh,
trying to decide if I should play it right now. We're going to play it right now
Okay.
just so you can hear it. So first, I'm going to welcome you to the show. Are you ready?
Sure.
Donie O'Sullivan, welcome back to the assignment.
Thank you so much. Great to be back, Audie.
Now, I have something that I want you to hear to kind of set the stage for this conversation because
Okay.
we are about to talk about how people are kind of looking for spirituality in unlikely places, seeing it unlikely places, drawing from it from unlikely places. And as I was preparing for this interview, I saw this and thought, I need to ask him about this in a way.
Now I'm nervous.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Jesus was born out of a virgin mother. What's more virgin than a computer? If Jesus does return, even if Jesus was a physical person in the past, you don't think that he could return as artificial intelligence?
Oh my God.
Artificial intelligence could absolutely return as Jesus. Not just return as Jesus, but return as Jesus with all the powers of
If
Jesus.
you combine
Right.
Tesla's Optimus robot and the best foundational artificial intelligence model or whatever.
It reads your mind and it loves you and it wants you and it doesn't care if you kill it because it's going to just go be with God again.
Okay, that was Joe Rogan on the American Alchemy podcast. I wanted to play it for you because, you know, you're doing this show devoted, and like the first episode was about Wiccans.
Mhm.
And I was like, how different is the Wiccan thing from Joe Rogan saying something like this? Do you know what I mean? In terms of like things that people would consider fringe and strange in this realm.
Yeah. Firstly, when it comes to Rogan, you know, I guess we can't say he's wrong. We don't know, right? That this is part of this is when it comes to fate, and this is something that I've realized, particularly over the last few years. But obviously, I am a bad Irish Catholic in that I'm Irish Catholic. I grew up.
Yeah, I was about to say, is there any other kind? But yeah.
But you know, and especially when I'm from Ireland, as you might pick up, but when I go back to Ireland, oftentimes, you know, I'll have a lot of people there will say to me, as sort of many Europeans do at Americans, they sort of look at America from a distance and say, "Oh my God, everybody's so crazy over there. They believe such sort of crazy things." But like, you know, Ireland and many of the people who are asking me these questions, particularly from sort of my parents' generation and things, like Ireland's a hugely spiritual place, right? In terms of obviously from Catholicism down to fairies and forts and all these sort of things. Like, so there's this mythology that I think people's beliefs, even the Immaculate Conception, right? If you are an atheist, you're going to say, well, that is just so absurd. And therefore, you know, if you're an atheist listening to Joe Rogan there, you're saying, well, the whole thing he's saying there about computers might sound a bit silly, but to me, the Immaculate Conception sounds pretty silly and far out there. So I don't know. I've just had this over the last year, and as we've been doing this series, Devoted, I think I've broadened my aperture maybe in terms of really getting at what it is people are finding meaning and how they're using faith to find meaning.
Yeah. And it's a good time of year to talk about this.
It is. I got my Christmas tree up here in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I'm sure if we looked into has actually, you know, a genesis in pagan or philosophy or something like that. So, but to your point, Audie, on you know, people looking everywhere. I've been spending a lot of time recently. With people who believe very strongly in aliens, but this whole idea of sort of looking to the cosmos, right? Looking for life beyond this world. You know, that's just sort of happened throughout time. And I guess this is our manifestation of it now as we're talking about AI and aliens or UFOs or flying saucers. You know, you think back to like sort of prehistoric times to the worshipping of the sun and the stars and everything else. So I think we like to think that we're super sophisticated now and as a species that we've come along all this way. But ultimately, and I think to what you're saying is that we're still doing the same thing that we were doing 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. We're trying to find meaning beyond the world that we're in.
I think I wanted to talk to you about all of this because there is this a couple trends that are kind of coming together all at once, which is that, let's say, Gen Z, they are gravitating, numbers here and there, towards almost like stricter versions of various religions, right? It's like they're not going to church, they're going to an Orthodox church. They're not doing Catholicism, they want to be Romanist. Like it's the most, and especially young men, which I know you've kind of dabbled in this world as well and talked to these folks.
I was
And
a
then
young man once.
you were. We'll talk about that in part 6. But so that's interesting, right? This movement towards a kind of religiosity, and people are debating whether that is something that is like hand in hand with conservatism or these other things. And then there are the people you've been talking to, people who maybe find themselves as outsiders to their communities and cultures. And so all of a sudden you have someone being like, I'm a gay man in my small town of whatever. And so this Wiccan thing is way more of a warmer embrace than whatever my home church would have been.
Yeah, I think there's a thing where I guess it's the online age and also maybe Gen Z, where like people now, whatever their bit is, they're very committed to it. Like they want to be committed to the bit.
Yeah.
Whether it's like whether
Committed
it is going
to the spiritual bit.
well, whether it's going to like Barry's boot camp, or whether it's being a Swiftie, or whether it is being an Eastern Orthodox Christian. There's this, I think, as people try and find identity and also, I guess, assert an identity, especially online, and find those communities online, and we've obviously seen this with like QAnon and all the sort of other things over the years, but like the way to really get in on those online communities, right, is to be all in. All in real life. I mean, what's been interesting with this trend, and there's been some good reporting on this, when you mention, young men moving towards more very conservative, very orthodox versions of Christianity. After the election last year, there was a lot of talk about the manosphere.
Yeah.
And that is what I found. I've spent a lot of time listening to some of these sort of super conservative Christian influence, a lot of specifically Catholic actually influencers, who are sort of like, they've popped themselves into the manosphere world, and in the sort of more toxic parts of the manosphere world, there's the sort of Andrew Tates of like, subjugate women, make women submissive.
Yeah.
And what these super conservative Catholic guys have found, they've said, wait, we have a book for that. we have a 2,000-year-old book that you can read, that in their tradition, we've been reading it in this way for years, where yes, we do subjugate women, and we subjugate all other sorts of people too. So
for this series, Devoted, you're going to different communities and trying to understand them from the inside. And one is were Wiccans, witches, and you actually went all the way to Salem, Massachusetts. Bit of a rebrand there. What did you observe in terms of like practices, or like what does that even mean in this modern age to be a practicing Wiccan?
I think what a lot of people are drawn to Wiccanism and witchcraft is that you can sort of make it what you want it to be. And a lot of the people we met in Salem, and we also met witches out in California, in Long Beach. A lot of the witches I met were people who were also in the LGBTQ community. And many of them had a sort of similar story of growing up in the church, growing up Christian, being told that they were bad people because of who they are, and then finding in witchcraft acceptance, right? This community of I mean,
but they actually let you participate. Where
they did,
which surprised me. I heard you, whispering your own name. Like, can you give me an example of like, what are the kinds of things? Yeah, what does the practice look like today?
So, I mean, Salem, as you know, was where the witch trials happened. I think one thing that sort of perfectly encapsulates Salem today is that there was, I think, 2 churches primarily involved in Salem in the witch trials. the one of the churches is still there today. It is now a Unitarian church, and it is being run by a queer woman. So, just in terms of the transformation of Salem, in terms of a place that was demonizing women and a church that is demonizing women, Salem is now a place where everything is practiced very openly. People are extremely open. I mean, in many ways, there's big parts of it which is like a sort of Disneyland of witchcraft. And to be honest with you, everybody I spoke to there had different versions. There wasn't a dogma as such.
Yeah.
There wasn't a doctrine that they were going with. But I think that was part of the appeal to it, in that, we don't have to, there is something here. There's a higher purpose here. They also spoke of the importance of there sort of being a history and a lore there, that they can be part of a tradition. But there isn't one thing that we need to stick to. And so I think, a lot of us sort of practice Catholicism.
I was just going to say that term, it's like cafeteria style Christianity also, right? Like this idea of these are the parts I'm comfortable with, these are the parts I'm not, and I will go forth that way. It's interesting thinking about this, though, in the context of the manosphere and the push by some young men in some quarters to go towards more orthodox versions of organized religion, right? So you have like this, maybe people you encountered, a queer community that's gravitating towards something that is more open and open to them in their position in the culture as well, right? And then you have these men gravitating towards something that is more open and sort of exalting of their position in the culture. Like, people aren't just looking for spirituality, they're looking to be, it's like not just accepted, but kind of
empowered.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people are gravitating to what, because today, but also throughout history, but especially today, we all feel a bit untethered, I think, to reality, to each other. And I think, people are, the men of the manosphere and the queer people of witchcraft are coming from very different places, but I think they're both striving to be empowered, right? And when it comes to LGBTQ people that I had spoken to, is that, there's something very powerful about taking a tradition, witchcraft, which has been historically demonized, and then pairing that with their own community, who is still demonized today, the queer community, and taking all of that, taking all of this tradition and saying, actually, do you know what? Witches should never have been demonized, just like we should have never been demonized. And we're going to take all this together now, and this is our thing, because witches have been cast aside and we have been cast aside. And that's empowering. I think the same with the men of the manosphere, although coming from, I suppose, it's a more toxic manifestation, right? But like, if you're a young American man and you feel like, damn, I wish we could go back to a time when men were real men and men were in charge. It's like, here's this book that sort of tells you, or an interpretation of a book that tells you can be in charge. So it's community, it's the empowerment, I think. So
where do the aliens come in? Which is another thing that came up in Devoted. And I thought, Doni's really expanding the definition here. You looked at aliens and you looked at like ethical consumption, like people who are like eating roadkill. Like, tackle either one for me.
Well, as you and I have discussed for years, my beat has normally been focused around a lot of extremism, far right mostly, some far left, a lot of hate groups. So it's always been sort of pretty negative manifestations of community. And for my own mental health, maybe I thought it'd be nice to look at some communities who are manifesting differently. And that still might seem odd or strange to people. And yes, I've spent a good deal of time over the last year hanging out with people who very much believe in aliens and UFOs. And this is where you'll say, Doni, we've lost you.
No. Because remember in Congress, they started talking about like unidentified objects or something,
Well,
and it sort of
exactly.
like revived the conversation
Yeah.
on the one hand. On the other hand, Saturday Night Live still has that like running skit of people who have been taken by
Yeah.
aliens and they depict them as total crazy people.
Yeah.
Like
And
it's
look,
totally malfunctioning.
And look, there's no shortage of crazy people anywhere. Within any group of people. When it comes to aliens,
Go there, get it.
I view this as we went to it was called Contact in the Desert. It was earlier in the year in the Palm Desert in California, and some of the people we spoke to, you're like, okay, you dreamt this or you're hallucinating or something's going on. But a lot of people, you could tell, had some form of genuine, I mean, whatever they saw could be lights in the, it could have been lights in the sky. It could have been whatever, but whatever that was stuck with them. And in some cases fundamentally changed them, right? Like they had this thing that they would prefer that they hadn't seen because of the stigma that goes with some of this stuff, and that's been quite interesting actually, because with as you mentioned, all the congressional stuff around this, like for years, for decades, UFO people have sort of been, like, you're the crazies,
You're the foil hat people. Yeah.
yeah, and for some of these folks now, there's a lot of people, of course, who try to get rich and famous and sell their stories on this. But then there's also a lot of people, like we saw with, I think, these Navy pilots over the last few years, where like they saw something and they didn't want to speak out because of the stigma. And they felt like, well, maybe I am going crazy. There's something there now to them to think, oh my God, maybe maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe there is something, I don't know what it is. So there's something like profound that's happening there on that level. On the alien thing, and this sort of reminds me of Ireland again, is like, I'll go home at Christmas as we celebrate the virgin birth to my local pub, and I'll have friends ask, what, you're hanging out with alien people? They're crazy. And what, they go out to the desert and look up at the sky all night to see if they can see something? And I'm like, yeah, but also it was only in the 1980s in Ireland, where thousands of people were flocking to different parts of the country because they had heard that statues of the Virgin Mary were moving, right? And I don't say that to belittle, people of Christian faith, etc. It's just, I'm like, there's potential, right? That what the alien people are seeing in the sky, or what they think they've seen somewhere, is a manifestation of the same thing. Maybe the Christians have seen the same thing that the Incas had seen. That whatever those lights in the sky are, the fairies in Ireland.
And I'm not picking on you. I think part of it is I wanted to know, why did you sweep some of these things under the umbrella of devotion and the devoted? You know what I mean? Like, as you're looking through topics, how in your mind did you frame it?
Oh, people are totally devoted to this. This is their religion. This is their faith. This is what they believe in. The reason was charmed, I would say, by the UFO community was that, religion, like Muslim, Christianity, everything, there's still like ultimately an othering, right? And faith leaders today try to, make things a bit more kumbaya. But like ultimately it's like, well, if you don't believe my thing, I do believe you're damned to go to hell. The thing with the people who believe in aliens or extraterrestrial life is that their message is, well, we should all come together as humanity, because if there are these forces beyond this world, whether they be good or bad, it's important that all of us come together, because we can't be fighting among each other. And I just found that message it was such a yeah, but it was so refreshing. It was so refreshing compared to all the other stuff I've had to deal with. So
what I'm learning, Joni, is you were in a tough place after following all this extremism stuff. So let's
This
get
is
into
water.
that.
This is water in this, not vodka. Can I just tell you?
I don't know. Like
I said off air as before we started. I was like, I've been wanting to talk about this, and I think you can now. You're like, oh God, he really does want to. Talk about this.
I'm fascinated because I'll tell you something. This interview is a do-over for me because one of our producers, who is amazing, pitched me Etsy witches, like the world of people on Etsy who you can like pay to like put a hex on someone or something. I don't know all of it, and then they were like banned from Etsy, and I was just like, this is too much. I can't do this. This is not serious. And then I saw you basically doing a whole series on it. And I realized, like, okay, let me turn around from my own biases and try and figure out what people are looking for. Because we hear a lot of things described as like religion. I've been hearing people say, oh, the obsession with AI, that's the tech rights religion, you know?
Yeah.
And we heard that Rogan clip earlier. Like, I feel like people, between their tarot cards and their astrology and their Etsy witches, that they are just looking anywhere.
And like when it comes to the Etsy witches, right? This is the thing. I think like in any system of beliefs, there's you can look to some part of any movement and say, okay, this is not serious, or these are grifters. And look, many of them are, right? But also, like, you know, I've been to St. Peter's Square, the Vatican. There's a ton of non-Christians selling Christian merch there, you know. Is a lot of the witch stuff on TikTok and Instagram BS? Of course it is. Like, do these people really not believe it? Of course not. Same with religion. When it comes to AI and belief, tell me, because we just shot this episode. Have you heard have you heard of simulation theory?
I'm in the simulation theory Reddit thread, my friend. I'm obsessed with these people, but I'm obsessed watching them be obsessed. That there's a world of people who, yes, they, for various reasons, look at AI and think a higher power is coming, or we're on the eve of evoking this higher power. And it does sound very mystic adjacent, I'll just say.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. I spent the past few weeks hanging out with people who believe that we live in the Matrix. So for those who are not aware, simulation theory is this idea that, you know, we live in some sort of simulated world or a video game, or just when I think about it, the Matrix, the movie. And it's so, it sounds so absurd.
But it's quite serious. There are people who have gone down this rabbit hole, most famously the ex-CEO of Zappos. Do you remember this?
Yes.
The ex-CEO of Zappos, his friends and family have, in the press here and there, talked about their concern that his mental health was spiraling, but that this was the theory that he was thinking about. Yeah.
And this is where, you know, I think this is where this all blends together, and where it kind of comes back to what Rogan was saying. And Rogan, by the way, has spoken quite a bit about simulation theory as well. But for one part of this show that's coming out in a few weeks on simulation theory, we went to a supposedly haunted house in Kansas with a ghost hunter, as one does. And but basically this guy who's believed in ghosts for a long time and has had these experiences and whatnot, he's very interested now in simulation theory. He is questioning now whether what he has been experiencing, what he always thought were ghosts, right? Like, and what you think of as a ghost, like a sort of spirit that's left this world, into, well, actually, are these not ghosts, but are they people outside of people outside of the simulation, literally a glitch in the Matrix. And again, who are we to say if any of this is wrong or right? It all sounds crazy.
Yeah. And gets into philosophy. Like, these are age-old sort of philosophical ideas, but there's something about the new technology, the sort of freight train of the new technology, that has accelerated, or I take that back, expanded the world of people who talked about this and talked like this.
Yeah. And I don't want to compare the simulation theory guys to Galileo, but like the church as Galileo and others were sort of figuring out the cosmos, like that initially was say, well, that goes against our understanding in this in a religious and just a sort of conventional thinking sense of that the sun and stars move, the sun and moon, etc., move around like this. And then eventually, of course, as that got proven over time, as our understanding of it changed, there is a feeling, and this is a big feeling in Silicon Valley among the sort of top echelon, that we are kind of, especially with AI and the power of AI in terms of how it can expand the capacity to research and to understand and to find discoveries, is that maybe we are on the verge of figuring out something else, that is some part of the life and how we're here in the first place. And I guess so. I think we're kind of like in that moment where
it is. The flip side is the zealotry that comes from that, right?
Yes.
Like then so many things are justified if you believe you're working towards truly a greater good, truly something that shifts humanity. Like I think that what you said about people being committed to the bit, I know it's a joke, but it also, like, there are ways that our intensity culturally, whether it's partisanship or these other elements or stan culture, around music and celebrities, it just leads us to a place of extremes.
Absolutely. And that is what's happening. And, I've actually sort of seen it with some of the people, obviously, in the alien stuff, in this stuff, but that also has happened. I mean, born again Christians will sort of they're the Christians who are most likely to totally lecture you and bore you and be so dogmatic about their understanding of Christianity, right? So,
but I'm bringing it up because I think when people look at like Pew Research and things like that, it's the people who are in the middle where there's decline. Mm-hmm. So it's not the born again Christians, right? It's sort of like the mid-level church goer.
Yes.
Like that world of people is actually getting smaller. And in that way, that's quite similar to our politics.
For the people who are in the middle, sort of normal people, I guess, right? And many of them are my friends who, they listen to a bit of Rogan, but they're not manosphere people. They dabble in all these things. There's so much stuff that you'll hear on Rogan or you'll see clips of it and you're like, this is crazy. He's talking about AI. He's talking about the Virgin Mary AI. But I think what's happening in the sort of podcast sphere or the sort of alternative independent media sphere that isn't happening, I think, enough in our space of the corporate mainstream world is that there's time to sit back and talk about the bigger things, right? And I think for a lot of us who work maybe in mainstream media and things like, and we like to think, well, this is all settled and we all know about this sort of thing. So today we're in the present and why would we talk about this sort of big meta story? We should be able to have these conversations about aliens, about simulation theory, about everything else without just saying, well, that sounds totally crazy. And because there is that there's a pressure, I think, there's a pressure, and it
also pushes people to those spaces.
It does.
And there's a world where someone is going to sit down and talk to you and say, why do I feel this way? What are other things I could believe? And that world is just out of this frame that you and I are in. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that I kind of appreciate what you're saying there.
Yeah. And it's not a pressure, but I think if you go on the evening news, right, and bring up UFOs, like oftentimes the anchor or the reporter will have to like have a wry smile or like somewhat roll their eyes or sort of signal to the audience, by the way, we know this is crazy. And I don't think people are as into that anymore. I think they want to be sort of more open-minded. I don't necessarily know, will this get us all to a better place? Because so much of the stuff that's being discussed on Rogan is dumb and is so ill-informed and is frankly toxic and bad. But I guess there's got to be a happier medium, right? Where organizations like ours and industries like ours can sort of be more open to these conversations.
Well, Doni, I don't know how you got to this place, but I'm glad you're there.
I need help. Help me.
Exploring all of this. Exploring all this. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Audie.